Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week we're going to be talking about a video game that only I really started playing back in June. But then, because I played that, I played the sequel, and then played them over again. So, my year has been dominated with this game, and I'm really glad I played it. And that game is the Somnium Files. To get a little bit of a backstory for this, you have to go back about 5 or 10 years with a video game director known as Kotaro Uchikoshi. Or Kotaro, excuse me. Kotaro Uchikoshi. If that name is familiar at all, it's probably due to his game series before this, known as Zero Time or Zero Escape. It was a series of escape room games back when, remember escape rooms being a thing, and now they're a thing, but nobody talks about them anymore. Well, this was a game that focused solely on that. Another thing that those games tended to focus on was a weird kind of sci-fi sort of, I wouldn't say mumbo-jumbo, but they're very laced with kind of awkward, disturbing ways of killing people, focusing on how they interact in an escape room environments, but also having this weird layer of like time travel meets parallel universes meets all sorts of kind of weird, wonky science shit. So it's kind of dark, disturbing human melodrama and, you know, psycho thriller kind of stuff with serial killers and shit. And then you have people stuck in rooms. Then you have this undercurrent of time travel and world manipulation and secret societies and conspiracies, all sorts of weird shit. So it got a cult following, and I think each game kind of solidified itself. People swear by 999. I tend to think Virtue's Last Reward was the best, but I mean, whichever way you go, it was a steady uphill climb, I think, and he was smart enough to end that franchise, even though it was getting him more notoriety. He went in a different direction, in the Somnium Files direction, because I think a lot of franchises like to stay as franchises, and yes, you get different directors here and there, but the games end up being the same. You know, you can only do so much with the same franchise, even if you're the same developer, the same same development team. Like, it's rare that, say, Ys, right? It's rare that Ys can go for 10 games and for, say, the last 5 or 10 have pretty much the same staff over and over. Final Fantasy got away with it in the early 90s because you could make a game every year or so, not like every 2 or 3. So I think Uchikoshi was smart in saying, okay, I've got this whole Zero Escape stuff, but there's only so much I can do with it before it gets old. So let me try something slightly different. So he took aspects of that game style, that visual novel meets escape room stuff, and they changed it around into a different concept. And I actually appreciate that, because it's still that type of game, but done in a different way, in a different setting, in a different mindset. Now we have, instead of weird time travel shenanigans and, you know, weird paradoxes and all sorts of weird stuff in an escape room, now we have a crime thriller, a hard-boiled crime thriller, and they add in just enough weird scientific bullshit to make it so you have a weird narrative. But Somnium Files, I mean, I heard about it, but I didn't really experience it and play it because I was not really all that interested. And then I saw footage of it, and then I tried it, and then I was wholly bowled over. And now that I do more visual novel style games recently, this is one of the ones that I really point to as something that people should play or experience. And it does have some warts to it. It's odd in certain instances, but I do think that the narrative is very strong. The characters themselves are very likable, and it has enough charm to it even with some of the weirder design choices, that I think it's a really good game. And I'm happy that they made a sequel called the Nirvana Initiative that came out this year, focusing on a different set of characters, but still similar. So they added the same characters, but focused on a different set of them, which is always important. But we'll start with characters and plot. So I'll kind of weave it in. Because it is a crime thriller, I don't want to give out too much, because that would be a bit of a problem. But so I'll set up kind of the main characters, what their story arcs represent, and what they're doing, and then kind of go from there. Because this is the sort of thing that if I went too deep into, then, it would easily spoil a thing. But suffice it to say, we're set in Japan. We're not technically Tokyo, give or take, but somewhere in Japan. We have a series of killings going on, known as the Cyclops serial murder case. And a special task force of the police is trying to investigate these weird murders where people have been killed and then having their eyes gouged out. So they keep one eye and then the other one gets plucked out. So that's the only kind of MO of this killer. A special investigation unit known as Abyss, I think it's Advanced Brain Investigation System, or something like that. So they have a subset of people known as Sinkers that have this technology that only they have and the skill set to understand it, to investigate crimes in an interesting way and figure out what is going on inside people's heads to kind of give them clues and track down whether they are themselves. So they interrogate people and they chase people down still, but they use a special sync machine. So that allows them to go into kind of their subconscious and learn things that they don't want to talk about, and then expose them as part of the investigation. So the characters can go in and out of the narrative and find different people and kind of bounce around ideas. So our main hero is Kaname Date, voiced by Greg Chun, or Chun, however you want to pronounce it. He was Nanba from Yakuza 7. I really need to get to that. I know I'm going to review Yakuza 7 someday, and oh god, am I going to enjoy it, because if you haven't watched my playthrough of it, I enjoyed the hell out of the Yakuza 7. Anyway, so Date is joined by an AI that is known as Aiba, codename Eyeball, because she can fit inside his eye as a special kind of prosthetic. But she's an advanced AI. She can hack into any system. She can practically do anything else. But she's also like giving him dosages to help with some weird like psychological issue he's got going. She can monitor his health. She can report back to their boss or anybody else. They can make phone calls or Skype calls. Basically, Aiba can do anything on the planet because she is an advanced system. Think the most advanced AI character you can think of, and then go even further than that. It also helps that she's a character in her own right, voiced by Erica Harlocker, who was Anne in Persona 5, and Yumiko Chibami and Kakegurui, that lady. You've heard her probably by now for the last 10 years. Anyway, so Aiba has this like working relationship with Date. Date is a bit of a perv and a bit of a weirdo, but he's very serious about his stuff when he isn't off drinking or staring at women and whatever. And she is very stone-faced. But every so often you'll see this like weird dynamic where when they enter a Somnium, Aiba decides to make these weird like gesticulations and jokes and just weird things that she doesn't interpret as being, she interprets as being funny or being human, and then Date is just kind of staring her off and just like, what the fuck are you doing? So they bounce off each other perfectly. And if there's anything that this game, and really what Zero Escape did perfectly, it's bouncing characters off each other. Because in a visual novel, really, because you're not focusing on the visuals, you have to have a good narrative, you have to have a good story, you have to have a good set of characters. to inhabit that story. Because a story can only be about 10 or 15 different things that mix and match in different, different orientations. But if you have a character set up that bounce off each other with a sense of familiarity and chemistry, it goes a long way. I spoke about chemistry in my Spice and Wolf video, and it does stand true, because Date and Aiba are just perfectly aligned. But then you contrast that with their boss. Who is Boss? That's her name. She's voiced by Allegra Clark. I don't know if she has any, super known roles, but she's always kind of been in anime and video games the last 5 or 10 years, but, not like Erica, who I can just, snap my fingers and say, yep, that's her. But Allegra's been in tons of stuff I've heard before, but this is the one I know her most from, and Boss is, sort of flirty, but very serious. But she's like this weird kleptomaniac where she has her office just full of these weird Japanese iconography, like these weird tanuki things. Then she's got pictures and postcards of every goddamn thing in the world. You can even get an achievement for looking at every single thing in her office, which will take 20 fucking minutes or something like that. And, Boss has sort of a weird working relationship with Date where she's kind of fucking with him. So it's just oh, come on. I'm not that much of a slave driver, am I? It's except for that time I had you lick scum off my boot. That sort of weird, flirty, but still, when the boss needs to be, she will fucking stare at you and get shit done. She will blackmail people. She'll do anything she needs to. So I'm all on board with that kind of leader. Rounding out Abyss is Pewter, voiced by Sean Chiplock, who was Hummel in Ys 8. He was Mishima in Persona 5. He's been God knows in everything. So Pewter's whole thing is he's the one who created Aiba. I don't think he technically created the sync machine, though, but he's got the technical know-how to do it so that Boss and Date doesn't really have to know. He describes what is going on in the subconscious brain. He can describe what's going on in the sync machine. He can describe the ins and outs of what a killer might be thinking. He doesn't know every little bit of information, but he rounds out the group perfectly so that Date knows what he needs to know, Boss can do what she needs to get through red tape, and they all kind of coordinate each other as the small, close-knit crime unit that really knows how to get shit done, but also has to deal with the fact that they're a small unit and these police officers are kind of dumb. But you'll see, every so often detectives and private investigators and, forensics experts, that was the term I was going for, at crime scenes so that they get the information they need so you can get through these Cyclops serial killings. So you got all of these characters. And then you have about 5 or 6 different subsets of little, mini stories with other characters that still kind of weave themselves in and out of the narrative when they need to. So the main narrative is between Date and Mizuki, voiced by Karina Bottiger. And Karina Bottiger was Somali from Somali and the Forest Spirit. That was what I know her most from. But Mizuki is great. She's this 12-year-old, super strong, super just snarky, just girl that Date's a perv. She's not. He's trying to be a super serious dad, but he kind of sucks at it. She doesn't want anything to do with him. So they kind of have this weird adopted, because they're adopted. Because what ends up happening is Mizuki and her parents don't exactly see eye to eye, and as we'll see through the game, she has some shitty ass parents. And I'm not saying Date's perfect either, but in the grand scheme of things, she needs him and he needs her, and they work together in a comedic / serious manner. And Mizuki's great. Mizuki's probably my favorite character in the game because, again, she has a lead pipe. She's super strong. She's super fast. She's super gumptious. She will fucking wreck a dude. And Date is trying to be overprotective, and, it makes sense. He's 35. She's 12. I get that. But Mizuki is just just always there to just be either the grump, just bleh, you stupid, but also be like I need to get shit done, so let me fucking do it, and then when she gets to do something, shit's gone south, but she always seems to help out. She's friends with Iris Sagan, the other main character in this game, voiced by Jackie Lastra, and her and her family take kind of a weird, Iris, Mizuki has the most importance because of her relationship with Date, but Iris, in terms of storytelling, has the most to do in this game. And Iris is kind of an internet idol slash dancer slash, whatever. She works for a company known as Lemniscate, who is involved with Mizuki. That's how they are, BFF kind of thing. So Iris is always included in Date's thing. I'm not going to give away why, but suffice it to say, Iris is the main story narrative, other than Mizuki, and with her mother as well. They're very integral to the plot, so we'll just add that in there. You do have some other characters. Let's see, Ota Matsushita, voiced by Zach Aguilar, who was in the recent Soul Hackers game as, I think his name is Arrow. Mayumi Matsushita, Felice Sampler, just practically been in every goddamn thing ever for 50 years. But then you have, so they're, trying to lead a family, but they know Iris and they protect Iris, but the mother hates Iris because Ota's spending all his time and money on her. But Iris is not really a gold digger. Ota's just a fucking dirtbag nerd, an otaku nerd. He sucks. We have a overarching narrative with Sosajima, who is this politician guy, voiced by John Demita, who was in Final Fantasy X of all things. I had heard him for 15, 20 years, and he started popping back up in anime and video games and shit. But he was, if anybody remembers Luzu from Final Fantasy X, he was one of the Crusaders, and the main Crusader guy when Tidus washes up on Bisay. That's how far back that guy goes. But Sosajima is this very annoying, very asshole politician. He knows everything about everything, but refuses to talk because he's a politician guy. But he basically has hitmen around the clock. So what are we going to get out of him? Probably not. But then you have several other characters. The other major two are Mama, voiced by Patrick Sates. Awesome voice actors, done everything. And Moma Kumakura, Kaiji Tang, who was Ichiban Kasuga in Yakuza 7. I know these people. I know what they're from. I love it. Anyway, so Mama is a sort of informant for Date. Date goes to this bar known as Marble. He's always stopping in to check on Mama, who's, for some reason, polishing some sort of fish ornament or whatever all the time. It's weird. Mama's just there. But she will just do a thing and always just say, hey, I have some information, or maybe I don't, but I'll check out for you. And it's kind of always comedic whenever they're there. Moma's got a thing for Iris, though he can't say it because he's a mob boss, so he's played for laughs, which is good because Kaiji Tang's great at that sort of thing. I mean, he was Kasuga, for fuck's sake, so of course he's good at it. But yes, you just have a massive cast of characters. And so Date and Aiba, Boss and Peter are kind of the overarching narrative. Mizuki and Iris take the secondary characters, and then everybody else kind of filters in. The way this game works is you find out your case, which you start finding information, and you start doing picking apart crime scenes and getting data and learning the narrative. So you're doing a visual novel, but you're also doing a sort of LA Noire style, picking up stuff off the ground or seeking information. You're doing a lot of speech bubbles, talking with individuals. So you're following a narrative structure. There's not a lot of gameplay to be had, though there are occasions where gameplay is involved. But the majority of it is going to a place, usually with Iris, Mizuki, or some other person, and getting information about what's going on in that specific part of the narrative, because it starts to branch here and there. How it does branch off is via the Somnium. So once Date feels he has enough information to go on to kind of dig into a subject's brain for more info, he'll take them, with their consent, mind you, usually, to the sync machine at Abyss headquarters. And inside the sync machine is where the main gameplay loop happens, because Aiba takes the form of... if anybody's ever seen Shiro from Dead Man Wonderland, I know that's a bit of a weird reference, but that's exactly what Aiba looks like, but less comedic and goofy. So Aiba takes human form, because in her normal form, she's like a pocket eyeball with like goop. But in AI form and Somnium form, she can look like a white-haired lady with electricity out of her face or something like that. So Aiba is in control. You, as the player, control Aiba to find these clues. And the idea is you have 6 minutes. There's a narrative reason for that. It's an arbitrary annoyance, which I don't really like in the first game, but I'll get that later. But within 6 minutes, you have to decide different little paths to do what are known as mental locks, because every character is going to have little things in their Somnium. They're going to have little bits of information that could be like check out a TV and click the button, or raise a wine glass and drink it, or go through a mirror and do a thing. You know, all these little weird environmental cues that you do. And Aiba will do whatever Date, the player, asks, and Date, as the character, will instruct Aiba to do the thing. You know, sometimes Aiba will question what the fuck you're doing, and sometimes it's a comedic thing and it doesn't mean anything. The issue comes in that every little action you do requires a time commitment. So it could be something small like 5 or 10 seconds, or it could be like 999 seconds, which is too long. So every time you do an action, or most every time, you're going to have what are known as timies. Most of the time, they'll cut down whatever action you do by a fifth, a fourth, a 10th, a 20th, or set it at a specific length of 5 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. Sometimes you will get a negative timey, which you can't get rid of until you do certain actions, and then that will take twice the length. So you don't want that to fuck you over too often. So you have to find the specific way, the specific method to open these mental locks. So it's a kind of a mental puzzle, not quite an escape room, you know, more of a scavenger hunt kind of thing. So it's a slightly different narrative and gameplay loop than it was in the Zero Escape games. So once Aiba and Date thumb around in the visual, you know, scape of someone's mind in the Somnium, you go back to the narrative as it was, the crime narrative, and picking, you know, so you go back to the LA Noire style prompts and shit. So Somnium is its own type of game. The other part, well, there's two other parts. A smaller minigame is the interrogations. So every so often, a character will be brought into the Abyss, and you'll get like a small, like 5 or 10 second interrogation sequence where you get these clues, and you have to pick which clue to work with what data Date's giving you. So Aiba will give you the info, and then you can say, okay, does this fit here? Once it fits there, you can start to implicate a person, and then that will usually lead them to either being released or going back into the Somnium, so you can use their Somnium again. The other gameplay scenario are QTEs. Our old friend QTEs. And they are terrible. They are absolutely goddamn terrible. I hate QTEs as a rule anyway, but these are some of the worst I've ever seen in any video game. I get trying to add gameplay variety, but man, they're done terribly. Sometimes you have to mash a button. Sometimes you have to hit the certain number, like left and then circle, or left and triangle, or up and down, and right trigger, whatever. Sometimes you have to... I think the worst one is you have this like floating target that always kind of weaves in and out, and you have a timer of like 5 or 10 seconds, and you have to fill up a gauge, and then once you fill up a gauge, you press R2 before the time runs out, and I almost always run out of time. You get to restart where you were, but they're terrible. They did improve in the second game, but there's a reasoning for all that going wrong. Music in the game, not all that worried about. This is one of the times where the music doesn't really, I mean, there is some music, but I'm not so bowled over by it that I can guarantee that I remember it, so I'm gonna kind of bypass it. While I am talking about the negatives, I might as well get them out of the way. The gameplay itself is terrible. Not to the point where it destroys the game, but if you're looking at it from a purely technical, like, is this well-designed gameplay? Hell no. Not at all. This was an attempt to try to add variety because, you know, LA Noir style segments are great, but some people may or may not enjoy that sort of thing. I'm okay with that because I've played Phoenix Wright, or I've played LA Noir, or I've played Danganronpa, God knows how many other ones. So I'm okay with a game just being about a story, being about crime dramas, being about a thriller, and not really needing gameplay to suffice. I really don't play Phoenix Wright to do the puzzle solving of put this clue in this segment and press this. You'll notice that because I'm using a guide to get through Phoenix Wright, so I don't waste my time doing it. I like the characters, right? So I'm there for the characters and their story. So when you have a gameplay like this where the QTEs kind of meander, QTEs suck as a rule anyway. They're dumb. But when they're so poorly implemented that you don't really have a lot of extra time, because there is a timer. It's one thing to press a button wrong because, I'm supposed to press up and circle and I pressed down and circle, or I didn't press the buttons right, or I didn't jam the buttons enough. Okay, I get that. What frustrates me is the up and down and always in a, always moving kind of reticule, and then you're supposed to press, a button, and then you're supposed to do that, or you get bumped to the main screen and have to do that part over again. It's dumb. I don't like it. So the QTEs can go suck a stick. The other problem is the Somnium itself forces you into 6-minute time limit, and it is trial and error, which is fine. I'm okay with that. If you're into puzzles and you're into weird, like, do this thing to do this thing and figure out how to do, if you're into that sort of puzzle solving, then I think this game has you covered, which is fine. Again, I'm not into that. I'm into the narrative. I don't want to be stuck behind trying to solve every little environmental cue that's there just to get the answer. So I'll use a guide and just be like, fuck it, whatever, I'm done. If you're into that sort of puzzle solving, there is a lot of cool ideas at play, and a lot of these tie into the narrative super well because everything serves the narrative. The Somnium is better than the QTEs drastically, but it still runs on a timer. What the sequel does that is better is that they give you a difficulty slider. So if you're on normal, you do this thing, but if you're on easy, then they cut down the time it takes to run the timer and run a risk. Or if you go on story, then they drastically cut down the timer. And when you're trying to figure out a certain thing in a certain time frame, and you don't, like, if you run too far and then you have to double back because you missed a fucking cue somewhere in the map or whatever, and then you have way more freedom in the sequel to make mistakes if you so choose. Again, you don't have to. In the first game, you're forced into whatever difficulty they give you, so you don't have that luxury. So you kind of have to trial and error, or do what I did and follow a guide the entire time. So you can't really fuck up all that much. Aside from the QTEs and the whatever, they have these weird perverted tangents. Dante's a perv. Almost too much. MoMA is a bit of a perv. Mama is a bit of a perv, and I get why you would do that for especially this very low budget or lower tier, Japanese game. And it does add to Dante's character that he's a stark raving lunatic when it comes to porno mags, but it does kind of weave itself in a bit too often. If it weren't for the characters being so good at bouncing off this weird perverted bullshit off of each other, then it wouldn't be so bad. But then you have these like weird achievements, like you can hit on the receptionist at Lemniscate who has these giant boobs. Moma's always talking about seeing Iris's panties or whatever, or shaking her hand, or it's like, dude, it's so cool. I'm like, she's 18. Like, you're lucky you're getting away with it, And again, the game calls you on it if you're a perv, but it's still kind of a weird aside. Do I want this game to be super serious all the time? No, but I could prefer if it wasn't always throwing out, hey, here's a porno mag, and then all of a sudden Date becomes this super fucking fast guy with super reflexes and whatever. That's part of his character. He sees a porno mag, his reaction time becomes super slow. He gets bullet time. Don't ask me. It's fun, but it can border on excessive. The benefit is that unlike certain things where, like in an anime where they'll show you a woman's tits, and for like tits or an anime shot or a butt shot for 5 seconds and you can't get away from it, you do have the luxury of not choosing to be a perv half the time. So it is a tangent. You don't have to do it. There are still instances of the perversion just rife through the game here and there that you can't really escape. But I'd say it's about 25 to 30% of the time. The other 70% of the time, you actively have to be a horn dog, which, again, is nice. It's personal choice. You want to do that, that's fine. Honestly, I'm kind of getting a little too old for this shit. But as far as the positives, the narrative is great. I like the whole crime drama aspect. The gore in this game is actually pretty fucking intense when it needs to be. There's a lot of fucking blood. There's a lot of cool stuff. It's an M-rated, or I believe it's M-rated game. It certainly fucking should be if you're talking about plucking eyeballs out of people's heads. Another thing that is beneficial that I wish every narrative game would do: full voice acting across the board. All game, it is voice acted. There's a few things that get past you, but one of the problems I have with Persona is that there are scenes where it isn't voice acted, or social links. Even in Persona 5, they were not fully voice acted. Like, they voice acted the first bit, they voice act the second bit, and then they forget it. In a game with so much narrative, and you're talking a 30-hour game, to have every single line of dialogue, whether it's subbed or dubbed, fully voice acted for you so that you don't have to read every single bit of information, it is very nice. It is a thing that I wish every game would do. Not every game has that, but I also think that is a thing that they did in Zero Time Dilemma, was everything was voice acted, if I remember correctly. But they added that into this game and the sequel so that you don't have to force yourself to read every single thing. I wish Phoenix Wright was so nice. I love the narrative of Phoenix Wright, but goddamn, I would prefer to have some voice acting sometimes in some of the newer titles, sure. The old ones I can understand. It was the DS era. You can't fit that information. But we live in the PS4, PS5 era. This game came out for PS4 and Switch. The fact that they have everything voice acted, and in most cases, the dub actors are great. I've said as much. I love the voice acting in this game. And it also helps that the character chemistry is perfect. Like Date and Aiba and Boss and Peter and Mizuki and Iris all kind of bounce off each other. Even the newer characters you kind of like instantly kind of gravitate to or get away, because they fit the roles that they're designed to do. Is any character absolutely 100% amazing? No. I'd say Date and Mizuki and Aiba are kind of the best characters, but everybody has their place. Everybody feels like they should. Ota is a disreputable, annoying otaku fuck who could just go as soon get stuck in a wall somewhere. But, you need a dork like that to balance out the stupid, I guess. To balance out how awesome the game is. Because you can't have the super insufferable people and then not realize how awesome the main characters are. So, again, I think every character fits what they're trying to be, even the villains. So, at the end of the day, The Somnium Files has its quirks. Some of the gameplay sucks donkey dick. I'm not going to lie. But as a narrative story, as a game story, as a pseudo-visual novel with some cool elements in there, it's got a unique sensibility to it. And I'm really glad I found this franchise, because I'd played the other three, but I wasn't like bowled over by them. But the strides that have been made in the technical side, it is a good-looking game despite, some animation quirks. It is the best-looking Uchikoshi game because it's on a PS4, God forbid, But Zero Time Dilemma always kind of looked like it was like swimming in water. Like the visuals kind of had this weird, like they weren't exactly talking, they weren't exactly moving right, they weren't exactly feeling. This one at least kind of feels not like high budget or nothing, but it does improve in that area. And again, it's fully voice acted. I appreciate that in a 30-hour game, especially one that's trying to tell you a story. If you're into a game for a story, you are going to enjoy it. If you're into it for a gameplay perspective, you're going to struggle, because the gameplay is a shitty version of the gameplay you've seen elsewhere. But I do appreciate that they've tried to weave a unique type of game inside a neat little package, because this and the sequel are both good. I think the sequel has its quirks too. I think I like both. Gameplay wise, I think the second one is a massive improvement, but there's still nothing wrong with the original, because again, if you want something on the darker, heavier side of a narrative with a little bit of nuanced comedy and perversion to balance it out, this is going to be a game that I think you're going to resonate with. But that'll do it for me today. And let's see what we've got in our schedule. I have the podcast schedule filled up for the next couple of months, actually, because we've done Somnium Files. Next week is Death Parade, so we're going to go right back into the darker side of life. Star Ocean 3, the stupid side of life, with some enjoyable bits to it, but a terrible plot twist. Shadow's House Season 2, a vast improvement on Season 1, but that's just a personal preference. The next series of... I was actually able to get some votes in for the next series of stuff after Shadow's House, and we're going to do 2 weeks of Ace Attorney stuff. We're going to start with Justice for All, because I just completed that game. Go watch Trials and Tribulations, or all of Ace Attorney if you haven't, on my other channel. There's the Ace Attorney anime, which... it's there. It's fine. Does okay, but it's fine, but I'll talk about it. The next game we do is East 9, Monstrum Nox. Thinking of, okay, it's there, it's fine. East 9 is 8, but worse. And then another game that got voted was, or another anime that got voted was Full Metal Panic. I enjoyed it. It's not completely my cup of tea, but I did still enjoy the game for what, or the anime for what it was, because I'm bouncing from games to anime each week, so I'm confused. But Full Metal Panic had its moments, also had some moments, bleh, but I still enjoyed it. At some point, I'm going to record a post-mortem for Final Fantasy VIII. I'm going to get Lee hopefully next week to record. That might replace... that might replace the Star Ocean one. That might replace the East one. But I'm also probably going to wait it out until the game proper has ended on the channel. So that's going to be like 40 days. So it's probably going to take the place of East. And I'm going to put East later. But that's the plan for right now. I've got a couple of months set out in stone. And then when I need to, I'll put in some polls for everybody else to vote for. But that'll do it for me. And again, I do hope you guys have been enjoying these podcasts, and go and check out my stuff on my YouTube channel if you'd like. But it's different for different people. You want the podcast stuff? I've got the podcast stuff right here. You want the gameplay stuff? I've got the gameplay stuff on my main channel. So, best of both worlds, right? But that'll do it for me, and I'll see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.